Follow the yellow brick road. Here we go. All right. So what we're going to do, guys, is we are going to start out right away writing a definition for a function. Okay. And while we're going to sort of do this right out of the gate here, if you don't follow along right away, I'm going to walk you through it a couple of times so that we all make sure we're in the same spot here. Okay. So what we're going to do, guys, is we are going to validate an input that we put into something, okay? So in other words, I'm sure many of you have had things where people just type random stuff in there and it causes an error in your program. We want to sort of get rid of that. And there's a couple of different ways we can do it. I'm going to introduce one today, and another one is something called exception handling, and we'll look at that down the road. Now, if you want to be a good programmer, try to do it more the way I'm going to do it today, and try not to rely exclusively on what's called exception handling. So exception handling is things that can handle like dividing by zero and stuff like that. Instead of giving you an error right away, it will do an exception handling event instead, okay? But this is considered, what I'm going to do today with you guys is going to be considered the better way of doing things. Sometimes you can't get around exception handling, but most of the time you can. All right, so I'm going to do a definition. I'm going to call this definition just validation. That's the name of our function, okay? And in this case, for my parameter, I'm going to use the word message for my parameter. And I'm doing this because if you actually walk through the book, they do something very similar. But also just to give you the idea that our parameter doesn't even have to be just like a letter like X or N or anything like that. We can put the word message in there, okay? All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to assign a variable. And our variable is going to be called valid underscore input. We could write it like that, which is kind of the preferred way of the day, or we could do the camel variable where I use a capital I there, but I'm going to go with the underscore input today. And I am going to make this valid input variable a bool. Okay, it's going to be Boolean, so I'm going to actually type the word false into here. Okay, and so right away, what I am setting this variable to is the bool false. Okay, the only other option is true. Okay, so I'm setting it to false right away. Okay, now I'm going to use a while loop in here. Okay, so what I'm going to say is I'm going to say while not, okay, I'm using a couple bits of Boolean here, valid underscore input. Okay, so in other words, it's saying while it's not true, and I've already set it to false, so it's automatically going to be not true, then we're going to loop this thing through. Okay, we're going to make a loop there. All right, so now I am going to put another variable in here called answer. Okay, and for my answer variable, I'm going to ask for an input from the user. Okay, so I'm going to put input, and what I'm going to input, the message sort of, so to speak, is going to be whatever I type into the message place when I call on this function. So I'm just going to put message in here right now. That's all I'm going to put, okay? Answer equals input, so it's requesting input from the user, and whatever I type in this message space when I call the validation function, that's what will be put there. So if I said, what is your favorite color for my message, this would say input, what is your favorite color, okay? So that when we look at it on the screen, that's what it's going to be asking. What is your favorite color input, okay? All right, now I'm going to add another little thing for you. So you know how sometimes, so far, when we've been requesting something like a yes or a no, or what is your favorite color, we have to sort of account using some Boolean operators for the different things people would type in, right? Like they could, like if we're asking, where do you want to go, north, south, east, west, they could say north with a lowercase or north with a capital. We can actually get around that. We can allow it to identify things even if they're not capitalized correctly, okay? By sort of insisting that the input be a certain way. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take that answer, whatever we type in the input, and I'm going to set that to being the answer that the person would have typed in. Okay, so the first thing is, so if the input is, some word yellow, right? So the variable answer is assigned yellow. Down here, it's going to say answer equals yellow, and then I'm going to type dot upper. It's like calling an upper function. And what that's going to do is it's going to capitalize yellow, okay, automatically. And we'll see why that actually is pretty handy here in just a moment, okay? So this basically automatically converts the string into uppercase. Later on, when we learn more about strings, we'll find more of these tricks that we can start to use. They're not tricks, right? They're just built-in functions. Okay, so I'm going to say over here, let me give some space here. Let's hashtag. So I'm going to say converts to uppercase, right? Or capital letters. All right. So now what I can do in this case is I'm going to use an if-else sort of statement here. So now I'm going to say if the answer that is given equals, I'm using two equal sign here, right? Because I'm not assigning a variable. If whatever we typed in the answer, in this case, equals C, capital C. I'm going to use a capital here because I use this conversion. You guys don't know I'm using a C yet, okay? But you'll get there. Or if the answer equals, whoops, capital P. I don't know why I used single quotes there, but you could use double quotes there. Okay. All right. So if my answer equals C or my answer equals P, what I did here, guys, is on this input, if they type in a lowercase c, it's automatically, this next line here is going to convert it into a capital C. So now I don't have to do if the answer equals capital C or the answer equals lowercase c or the answer equals capital P or the answer equals. So you see, it's saving me a bunch of time here, a bunch of typing in my coding. All right, what I'm going to do is if I get these answers right here, a C or a P, then I'm going to set my valid input, okay, to equal true. Okay, what will that do to my loop, guys? If I type in a C or a P and suddenly the valid input is true, what's going to happen to my loop? What's that? It's going to kick me out, which is exactly what I want. Okay, it's going to kick me out. All right, if I do not type in a C or a P, I'm going to use an else here. I'm going to print something like you must enter a C for Coke. Hey, now you know what it's for. Or, whoops, P, yes, for Pepsi. There we go. Peeps. Ah! Apparently I can't type in the word Pepsi. Peeps. All right. And then I'm going to back out of here. And last thing I'm going to say is I'm going to return whatever the answer is. Okay. So it seems like there's a lot going on in here. And there are ways you can maybe make things a little less verbose. But we're trying to make it so we can't make any mistakes in here. Okay. So basically what happens then, right, is as long as we are not putting C or P in there, that valid input is going to stay false. And so it's going to go back through and loop. Okay. And it's also going to tell us that, hey, something's wrong here. All right. So it can kick us out of the loop if we do what it asks. If we put anything in wrong, it's just going to always loop back and be like, now, come on, really give us the right answer. What is it? Okay. All right. So now let's see how to call this function. Okay. All right. I'm going to make a new variable here called response. And I'm going to set it to my function validation. Okay. So whatever we input here, in other words, whatever works to this loop is going to become the variable response. Okay. And I'm going to say in the question, do you prefer, and I'm going to put this in little parentheses here, Coke or Pepsi? Question mark in my quotes. All right. Putting things in the little brackets like that tells the user that you're going to be typing in either C or P. And I just wrote Peeps again instead of Pepsi. There we go. All right, so it's just a really stupid little, questionnaire. Do you prefer Coke or Pepsi? Okay. All right. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this response and I'm going to run a Boolean on this. Okay, so I'm going to say if response, that's our variable, equals capital C, because it's going to be capital C, right? Or it's going to be capital P. That's the only thing our validation function will allow. And we've immediately called our validation function right here, okay? So if that's the case, we're going to print most adult Americans do too, okay? So if you type in C, it's going to say, hey, you know what? Most adult Americans prefer Coke too. For else, we will print, congrats, you and junior high school kids have the same taste. All right, there we go. All right. I'm making a judgment call on your character, depending on what you prefer here. No, actually, this is true. I didn't actually make this up. I didn't make that up. It's really interesting. Most young people prefer Pepsi up until they become like somewhere in the adult years, and it switches over to Coke. It's just a weird thing. I don't know why. Um, yeah. So why you always need a good sampling of your market, right? Because if you just polled junior high kids, you would think Pepsi was, the most important beverage. I mean, I'm sure it's changed now too. It's probably it's Monster or Starbucks or something like that. All right. So we did a lot of typing there, guys. Well, let's go ahead and run this thing, and then again, I'm going to walk you through it, okay? So we can see how this goes. Let's see if it works. All right. So go ahead and try it out a few times. Type it. I'm going to put a lowercase c, and there you go. Just says most adult Americans do too. Okay. I could run it again. So just to prove that you don't have to type a capital P and put a little p in there. Congrats, you and junior high school kids have the same taste. Go ahead and run one too, where you just type in some random information like we'll say, or if you just hit enter, right? Blarg. It says you must enter a C for Coke or P for Pepsi, right? And if I just keep hitting enter, I don't get out of that loop, right? Because it never sets my input to, true, right? My valid input. So you can type in whatever you want. G, nope. R, nope. P, hey, there we go. All right, so there you go, guys. It basically prevents us from being able to just mash a bunch of keys down and get an error message in that. So real quick then, let's go back and walk through this thing. Okay, so remember, this is our definition. Let's ignore that. And we are going to call our definition right away. So we've got this variable response, and it's going to be set to whatever our function validation is, okay? Validation has this question here, do you prefer Coke or Pepsi? And so it's going to go up here and it's going to run validation, do you prefer Coke or Pepsi? It's going to set this variable valid input to false. While not valid input, in other words, while that is not true, we're going to go to here. It's going to say answer. It's going to set that to input. Do you prefer Coke or Pepsi? We'll put an answer into there, right? So say we answer lowercase c. It will take that answer and it will set that answer to the uppercase, so a capital C. It will then say if the answer equals capital C, then it will change that valid input to true. Okay? That goes back to the loop. While not true valid input, now it's true, so we're kicked out of the loop and we're going to turn that answer of capital C. Okay, now if, and that's going to set that to the variable response. Okay, now if our response, which is C, is equal to C, which it is, we print most adult Americans do too. All right, so there's a lot going on there, guys. There's a lot bouncing back and forth, right? What if we put a different thing in here? What if we put in input in our message was, R? It would say answer equals R. You'd make that an uppercase R or a capital R. Okay. If the answer is equal to C, it's not. Or answer equal to P, it's not. So we're going to go down to else. We're going to print no. You must enter a C for Coke or a P for Pepsi. Okay. And then it's going to go back to the loop. While not true, it's still set as false. So it's going to ask us all over again. All right. So a lot of things going on. But you can also probably look at this and see how you can simplify this depending on what you were working on. Okay? And you don't have to necessarily call things down here. But one thing I do want you to note is we did a pretty good job, other than this print right here, if we type in the wrong thing, of not making a chatterbox function, right? We put the responses down here in the main body of